Hey there, everyone. It's Karen with Naturally with Karen. I'm doing this on my Facebook page. And I also will be posting this to YouTube, which is where I like to keep my videos. So tonight, I've got a really special segment, and it's called She's Nuts. Now, I know many of you watching, if you're interested in my channel, if you're interested in my page, and you follow what I have to say, you can tell when someone's up and down and things aren't going really well. And this is going to happen in my life. It's going to happen in your life. It's going to happen for lots of reasons because you're living during a time where you're actually involved in a lot of programming. And the majority of people around you are going to really be buying into that type of a program. So you could be, they could say, you'll have to take her with a grain of salt. They could say, she's nuts, she's crazy. I heard this from my neighbor next door was telling me that the other folks that are drunk and screaming and, maybe technically crazy said, I don't know, she's kind of nuts, but maybe that's because I talk about subjects that other people are not comfortable with. Maybe it's because I've actually grown an extra set of balls. I have balls like inside gonads, and I have another set of balls that I've earned. I just had some veggies. The dog and I shared veggies. But a lot of women, especially more than men, were called nuts or crazy. Now, nut was slang, if you look it up, for the head. And today's going to be a little bit of a longer live stream. So if you can't stick around, a lot of nuggets are going to be interfused in this live stream. I've kind of got an outline written down that I kind of want to, kind of make sure that I cover a few things here because it's been on my mind. I remember that, when this started happening to me, I was in my 20s. And at first, when I started working at law firms and I was putting myself through college, the comments were like, you're really eccentric. You're really esoteric. You're really this and you're really that. And I remember sitting there and thinking, in the 80s, God, blue suit, red tie, blue suit, red tie. They're all choked up to the neck and, they're all shaving off their hair with a razor. And how crazy is that they're living that life? But I got sucked into it for a time too. So other women have also been called crazy, and there's really good movies that I recommend to my female clients because most of my clients are females, but I also have male clients. And for 35 years, I've seen a lot of people starting for free. And then in recent years, I charge for my time. Time is valuable for everyone. So I've recommended that they see a movie that my mother recommended I see because she knew that after being so quiet and so wolf-like for most of my formative years, that especially after the police abuse incident here in Cloquet with my own son, I learned to be an advocate and I started to speak up and out. I started to teach free school classes on how to reverse cancer, and I gave a free school class on intuitive arts, despite the fact that two pastors' wives were telling their congregations not to come to me because I surely must be working with the devil to get the insights that I got. So other women, not too long ago, preceding us, and you men too, there's some of you men too, and especially gay men, I love gay men too. So Madame Blavatsky, if you've not heard of her, I recommend that you check her out. This is one of my books. I quickly grabbed one of them of hers, okay? And you might be able to tell from her eyes here, and I think there's another picture inside in this one, or is it? No, it's in my other book maybe. There's other pictures of her. If you look up Madame Blavatsky, she's really, it's kind of out there on the fringe, especially for the time period for a woman traveling all over the world and, learning about dowsing and numerology and, learning about all the different parapsychology endeavors, as my grandmother called them. But Frances Farmer was an actress, and she was played by the gal that, not Meryl Streep, but Jessica, that lived up here in Minnesota. She was played by her. And because she was an outspoken female, if they could not meaning the males, especially white male patriarchy, if they could not subdue females, then females were, they were relegated into insane asylums or attics, or they were just gotten rid of and killed, especially after the time involving the witchcraft trials, the witch trials of Salem, right? Is women were relegated to attics and starved to death or drowned or whatever, because all you had to do was say that a woman was a witch. And so to this day, maybe not so much with the very, very young girls coming up, but most of us women over about 30, it sends a little bit of a shiver up our spine, because we know at any moment, especially if you're living somewhere like Africa or somewhere where the Puritans still have a stronghold on the people through Western white male dominated religion, this is going to be a problem for you. It's very dangerous for a woman to come out and talk about things that might possibly be interpreted as witchcraft. Okay. So I ended up losing my biological family because I left. My parents moved to Minnesota from California, where I was born and raised. And they came to Minnesota 3 months before I turned 18. I was engaged to marry a man named Fred and had been dating Fred for 2 years. And when I turned 18, all I wanted in the world was to be a wife and a mother. I didn't give 2 cents about going to college or having a career or a business or being a shaman or any of those. All I wanted to do was to be like mom. And that's why these role models are so important. And Rahima Baldwin's work, You Are Your Child's First Teacher, is so crucial, especially for little girls, but now little boys with the agenda that's going on. So because I went back out to California with my earned $20 in a suitcase, and Fred had, quote, fallen in love with someone else in San Jose, California, which is where I was raised. I ended up staying on the floor of people because I was like, oh my God, you fell in love with someone else. Why didn't you tell me before I came out here? And he's like, well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And these are the things that end up happening, and they change our lives, and we can see them as a door opening, or we can see it as just a fatal episode in our lives. And so at the time, being 18 and oh my God, I based my whole world on marrying Fred. It was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But I had to solve a problem. And I took it to heart when my parents said, do not call us collect. Now remember, in 1981, there wasn't the cell phones and the laptops and the internet and all that. So when my parents said, don't call collect, I took it really seriously, and I didn't. I got a job at a 7-Eleven convenience store, and everyone got fired 2 weeks later because someone stole from the till, and it wasn't me. I was so absolutely honest and full of integrity, and so quiet, and so doing an extra job and everything and showing up on time, even though my life was kind of in chaos and I was staying on a floor. But so through this, I ended up figuring out, okay, wait a minute, I've got to go get some kind of a training so that I can make more money than what I'm going to get paid at 7-Eleven, and I can get treated a little bit better, because now I'm going to really need to do this. And so when I went there, I found out I had to take the year of bonehead classes, is what they called them, arithmetic. And because I tested so low on the college entrance, at that age, I was 23, 24. And when someone pulled me into, and pardon me, because I know some of you have heard this before, but others on YouTube may not have, so give me just a moment. I got pulled by a young man when I was taking some of the classes I thought were just going to be boring and useless. And here it was, the mid-1980s. And I had a philosophy professor, DJ Serralo, who I called back about 3 years ago and thanked him from the depths of my heart, not the bottom of my heart, but the depths of my heart. And I said, thank you so much for not teaching me what to think, but teaching me how to open my mind and think. So one thing after the other, this young man said, you've got to come to this class. It's called Raw Foods for Reversing Cancer. And I was like, I am not interested in eating bags of baby carrots all my life. I really like food. And all I knew was the standard American diet. I drank lots of milk. I always ate my meat. I always ate my little bit of vegetables. I ate bread, and I ate cheese. And I ate like most people did. And I think that's why my thyroid in part was so slowed down, in addition to having a mouthful of mercury amalgams. And I think that's why that my nickname, when I got to high school finally, and I shut down and I couldn't do algebra, and I kind of sat in the back of the class and I cut school. I started smoking cannabis in 1975 at 15 years old. And, I'd smoke every morning and just kind of hang out and cut school and, go to McDonald's with my friend Jim Krasnarich, whose parents had moved from Wisconsin. So look at this turn of play in the loop. And I went to that class and it just opened everything for me. But in doing that and discovering Greenpeace back in the day and getting invited to one of the first RAN meetings, the Rainforest Action Network, because I'm out in the Bay Area, I'm in San Jose in what's now, then was Silicon Valley. Things were really starting to pop. Money was really starting, millions were starting to come in. And so I too, being young, I got caught up in that, first the diet and going through college and, life was good. You don't have children, you don't really have a lot of responsibilities. But I was like, whoa, this is changing my whole life. So when I flew home those 3 or 4 times in about 20 years, I flew, because now my home has been moved from California to Minnesota. That was never the home where I grew up. My parents were kind of like, what? You're not going to eat what we have here for Christmas, or, so you're too good for our food. So this is the 1980s, and it wasn't something that they'd heard of before. I became a vegetarian. And so then in 1987, I walked into a Greenpeace store where I was born in San Francisco, and I was just up there tooling around, having fun, checking things out, going to Greenpeace. And I took home a video. I said, hey, what's really cool? What's really going on here? And they sold me a VCR tape called Diet for a New America by John Robbins. And I'd heard he was in Santa Cruz. And so all of my adult life, I lived in what we called the Santa Cruz Mountains, but it was a Los Gatos side. And then you could come over. It was kind of like just over the hill between San Jose and Santa Cruz, about a 20, 30-minute drive on Highway 17. And they said, this Diet for a New America, this is it. Like, this is the thing you want to buy here. So I bought that, and I bought a couple of other books. I never really got around to reading the books, but I damn sure watched the VCR. And after I watched it, I was like, my God, this is what's going on with the animals and in these factory farms. People were sneaking in and, taping what was going on with the animals. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, how could anyone who's got an ounce of love and empathy and kindness, connection, how could they possibly allow this to go on? And so I went up and, Mom, you wouldn't believe the next time I saw her, what I've learned about factory farmed animals and how different I feel. And so on and on and on. Karen, just like all of us should, could, would, under the guidance of elders that were awake and not medicated down, not drinking alcohol, not stuffing with foods that are putting them to sleep. That's why all the fairy tales, the 3 little bears and everything else are all about sleeping. So I started putting a lot of pieces together. I started walking, and I listened to Rastafari elders. I know some of you have heard this already, and they convinced me that Peter Tosh had made a really strong recommendation, because all I wanted to listen to was reggae and positive vibes and Bob Marley. And Rastafari elders, which I became Rastafari, for about 30 years, and decided recently I don't want to belong to any groups because they've really changed a lot, although it's in my heart. Was the recommendation of Peter Tosh was to get rid of your tell-a-lie, your tell-a-vision, right? And I looked at the guide that came, the TV Newsweek or whatever it was, TV Week or something, came in the mail, and it said television programming. And I thought, whoa, I got to let this go. This is not cool. So there was the animals, there was the diet. What else did I write down here? I wrote down a couple things. The foods, I saw and I felt. I started changing the cleaners I use. I didn't want to use Pledge because we had coffee tables and things that were made out of wood. I didn't want to use Windex, and I didn't want to use a lot of the toxic things. And a lot of our stores were bringing in suds. Suds is like a really old time Dr. Bronner's. People were watering down Dr. Bronner's a little bit and using that for household purposes. And people that I was friends with for many long years, instead of going and buying shampoos with all the chemical ingredients, because if you eat really clean, we were using, purified water, like from Mineral Springs, with lavender. And then in the hair, in the dreadlocks later, we would take pure sweet almond oil. This is what all the Rastas did back then, and put a sprig or two of dried rosemary. So you get your rosemary fresh, put some hemp twine on it. And in my house in the mountains, I had, different herbs and stuff, lavender and rosemary and sage, hanging with the hemp twine on it. And so when my mom and dad, came to visit the one or two times from Minnesota to visit because we had a big extended family at the time, and they came to my house, it was kind of like, whoa, what the heck's going on here? Like, you've changed, like, what's wrong? And I'm like, it's not about what's wrong. It's like, I just feel like I'm alive, for the first time. I feel like I've woken up. And if you haven't yet gone through this, if you're showing your parents the hair test, if you're showing your parents that you don't want to live on eggs and protein stuff and bacon and cheese and pizza and buttered noodles and chicken, and you don't want to go pay for nasty stuff like going to SeaWorld and places where animals are denied their nature, they're denied the freedom of their spirit, they're denied their own life, so that they can be utilized for you to just look at them and they can feel this pressure their whole lives. Then I began to speak out by being educated by Rainforest Action Network and being educated by Greenpeace and sitting at a big community table with John Robbins and meeting Michael Tierra, who I eventually went to herbal school with, and going on herb walks that were offered free at UC Santa Cruz, where I eventually went to school with Christopher Hobbs, who is, in my mind, one of the better herbalists on the planet next to Susan Weed. So going home, speaking to your neighbors, speaking with your coworkers, or in business now, those around me, I've come to realize that as exuberant as I am about, this is such a better way, if you keep drinking the Mountain Dew, and if you keep getting the flu vaccine, and if you keep eating like that, if you keep eating eggs, you're going to keep making cysts in your body, and those cysts are eventually going to get fibrin coating on them. And the fibrin coating, because of your mineral deficiencies, fibrin coating, the Teflon of the tumor that makes it, according to doctors, impenetrable, right? That they say it's not curable. You've got to go in and blast the body with, chemotherapy. All of these things, changed me. And they caused friends, neighbors, family over the last 35 years, largely, if not all, to drop off. So when Emma Sarah mentioned to me a couple of months ago, our children, because she went through enormous pain with her daughter, our children are now becoming a weapon fashioned against us. Because my son was in first and second grade when we moved here, and because the other parent did not comport with the plan that we made pre-pregnancy, by default, we ended up in a situation that caused me to move and relocate to a cheaper cost of living to have more time parenting, and ended up costing him to go into the school system and have that detach. So the abandonment, the neglect, the abuse of people within the school system, I don't care what school you go to, it doesn't matter. It is not home and hearth. Hearth is like the heart, okay? No one is going to love and care, and that beautiful love that shines out of your eyes, that finds your baby so special, is not something anyone else can give. So don't ever second guess or doubt yourself. That is an institution, right? These are all medical, dental, veterinary, the jobs, the courts, the banks. These are all industries that are parading on a plantation that are part and parcel of the matrix. So in order for you to be a matrix born and bred being, these are a part of that. Okay. And the matrix is always changing, the overlay, the sky, all the various things. Okay. So, as we go along, I began to hear people coming and saying, they think you're kind of nuts, or, I don't know, they said you're kind of crazy. Or one young gal came to me, 2.5 years or so ago. And after I had, been giving her some shamanly and coaching type, sessions and readings, and checking in on her and wanting to take another one under my wing, she told me that her mom had said, mom says, kind of take you with a grain of salt. So what does that mean? How does that make you feel? Could you possibly be someone like I have been, who's lived alone for years and years, who ends up in the hospital like I did in 2008? And because I relocated, because the friends that I had back home are not here 2,500 miles away, when doctors diagnosed me with 3 diagnoses in 2008 after abuse of power by police locally, and seeing this happen to my son, and the colitis of my stomach, swelling from inflammation, and me collapsing 3 days later, unable to hold, any liquids or, hold my bowels. It was just awful. But seeing something happen to your child as a mother, when your child is young and defenseless and you know that it's wrong, will really, really throw your gut. Your gut is your center of creativity. It's what you view your life. It's your gut feelings. It's your instinct. It's everything about your intuition. It's your gut feelings, right? It connects everything. When that happens and you're in a hospital and they say, well, who's your emergency contact when you finally come to and find out they CT scanned you and everything else, and you say, I don't have one. Now, I grew up with aunties and uncles and all the family coming to my house every Sunday at 1428 Searcy Drive in San Jose. Both grandmothers, maternal and paternal, Olive and Etna, Candy and Darwin, and Jim and Rick, and everyone, all the cousins and all the neighborhood children. We all played outside till maybe 10 o'clock at night. In the summers, California was warm most of the year, although we had what we called a winter, but it was nothing like here. And so most of us were priced out. Okay. So coming to the Midwest, I assumed, hey, I'd only been here 3 months, and I'd been here for a couple of visits and mostly at home and to the mall and a few things, and get back on a plane and go back to work after a week of vacation. I didn't really, really, really get to know it. But I knew that I wanted more time with my son. So moving somewhere that is slower is such a positive, right? Somewhere that has a lot of trees and nature and eagles. I thought, that's okay, because we're going to the Twin Cities. We're going to Minnetonka. It's 2.5 hours away. But after coming to mom's house where my nephew lives, it's 1.5 years younger than my son Zawa, the two of them connected in that first couple of weeks. And we found a little tiny 2-bedroom, 800 square foot house for $50,000, or I found it, because she said, why don't you drive around and just see if something clicks and you find some housing. And my son's going, I want to live by my cousin Dennis. I want to live here. And I'm like, oh, I'm really going to be a fool if, being a solo parent, if I don't stay connected to my mom and my brother, and my son has his cousin, and I have my nephew, and I can love him up, and they can love Zawa up. And man, we found that little house for $50,000, and things fell apart really quick. It was really ugly, because in that 20 plus years, because I left at 18 and now I'm 42, got up here July 1st, and I'd been very thorough in how I described my life is very different. I eat a certain way. You know that jobs are going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm extremely connected out here. I worked for the best law firm in town, Bossa Williams, Sachs, Attic, and Gallagher. I'd done a contract for the judges and had my own office in judges' chambers. I'd worked directly for the DA. Karen had driven a BMW and felt, pretty powerful, and, had her hair done and all that kind of stuff. And this is what I'm talking about. When you're in your 30s, when you're in your 40s, until after your seventh moon, it's possible that you can get caught up in your ego and that you can start to slip a little bit. So I did, you will, almost everyone will, right? We'll do things and make decisions about our children if we don't have elders guiding us and saying, wait a minute, don't do that. I did that and it backfired on me. It's not a good idea, right? Like we talked about the Game Boy yesterday. We talked about the iPads. I still see people with cell phones in their children's hands, and they're not even 10 years old. And I know what that radiation is doing to their skull. They shouldn't even be sitting there using them. Okay. Another mistake I made. I put a cell phone in my son's hand because what if I got stuck at the shop with a client and he absolutely got, in a position where he had to call me, but that wasn't really true. I didn't really need to do that even in my situation. And it backfired on me. So I offer advice and either people take it or they don't. I didn't take a lot of the advice that I got and I paid for it. And so, I try to warn people today about baby Einstein, cell phone, iPads, regular schools as institutions, vaccines, because of the chemicals. Get your children tested and make sure with their aluminum and thimerosal. Thimerosal is a mercury derivative. Formaldehyde is an embalming fluid, right? So as I'm speaking about Greenpeace and supporting Greenpeace and Rainforest Action Network, and I finished college, so I'm the first person in my family, and no one showed up besides Grandma, who I told you taught me as a young child, and my aunt, who reluctantly came with my grandmother. But my parents are probably safely, they're pretty comfortable, just leave it there. And they were comfortable then, and they chose not to get on a flight and come out for my son's birth, for my graduation from getting my AA degree. And so as I was in college and preparing to work in a law firm with my paralegal certificate, which is another 2-year credential, okay, big deal, specializing in family law, I would have the headphones on and I would be transcribing and typing, because I could type about 100 words a minute. That's why I type fast, from all those years and learning it in junior high school. So I would be hearing the tapes during my shift, whether it's 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it was. If I had to go, my classes were at night, I would work during the day. If my classes were during the day, Tuesday and Thursday, I would work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or, jobs would work around my schedule, starting as a girl Friday, meaning I did dishes and ran court documents to get a file stamp on them and made photocopies, and worked my way up into having an office and being probably one of the most senior executive level paralegals that had her own independent paralegal service. But I worked for that. I worked really hard for that. And so I would go home and I would use big words, and Mom didn't like that, right? We all have different strengths. And because I learned that all of us can do everything I can do, and they can do so much more, because a lot of you didn't have your mouth full of mercury amalgams, and a lot of you can do so much more than me in my lifetime. And that's what I want. I want that for you. But I also want to be able to choose very carefully who I give to, because I've learned by being bitten. I've learned by taking people under my wing and saying, this is to build a strong pack, meaning we have each other's back. We ride for each other. We care for each other if the other one is sick or down. And in exchange, right, we're going to learn things like communication, intuitive arts, dogs, pack behavior, medicine, regeneration, I'm going to tell you certain things that are very life-saving that took me many, many years to earn. So a pack is extremely important to me, but I've not been able to manifest one that is going to stick around and do what needs to be done, which is really crucial. It's crucial for my health and safety as an alpha female, much like, way back it was the alpha females, right? So I believe in respect and manners and keeping religion and politics and all of that out of it. So I very seldom get involved with anything that has to do with our president or elections or things, unless I'm like, this is pretty special. One time I've voted in, I don't know, 20 something years, right? So let me look at my list here because I've got some other things. So let's see, had power. Yeah. So I had power. I was driving a BMW, blah, 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 right? And I had all this stuff going on. I increased my vocabulary. I changed my diet. I started always being at the Wednesday farmers market in Santa Cruz at Pacific Garden Mall. It's an open air mall. It's not a closed mall. And behind the Pacific Garden Mall in Santa Cruz, if you ever get a chance to go, it's Wednesdays. And there used to be, until it's been really closed down, this part of it now, there used to be a huge drum circle. And maybe from time to time it might still come back. But on Wednesdays from, I think, 1 to 5 or something like that, or 1 to 6, the people would be out there with wildflowers and bouquets, and the honey lady would be out there with all the different sage honey is my favorite, and wildflower, and all these varieties, and honey sticks. So my son would always get honey sticks from the time he was really little. We'd be there with our basket like Zuri had in her picture. I had my basket here for the longest time with our long dresses and combat boots and dreadlocks and natural hair. And I mean, that's the way it was. This is over 20 something, 30 something years ago. I thought this is really taking hold. People would flood Santa Cruz in their school buses that they lived in, traveled in, homeschooled their children in with all their dreadlocks. Some people would take recycled tires and they would, cut out from the tires and make the sole for their sandals. And you'd be watching them tooling these sandals right there as we went to the Santa Cruz flea market, which is still going on at the Santa Cruz Drive-In on Soquel Avenue. And then they would take the thicker hemp and make these, sometimes macrame, these sandals onto the tires. So taking old tires and making sandals, it cost them almost nothing, but for the hemp and the time and the hole punching tools and stuff. And I watched people be artisans and live differently. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. I got really seduced to have the fancy car and the job that made me the money. But I started realizing that I was almost traumatized by the way one of the attorneys in the 4 attorneys that I worked with one at a time, but there were 4 that were all in the group. And the one that I ended up working with, that my aunt had worked with for many years, Candy, Robert Lewis, he was almost traumatizing. And even when I was pregnant, I went home one day and I was like, I'm going home. You shouldn't have thrown that on my desk and told me it's all effed up. And, come on, man, I'm pregnant. I worked my butt off for you. And when I took leave and a woman came in to take my place, she was like, you don't really have a lot of self-confidence. You don't really see your worth here, do you? And I was like, I don't know. I just, sometimes he just gets really upset. And I didn't really learn to advocate for myself and become this strong, powerful female voice that gets everyone so upset and makes people think she's aggressive or she's angry. No, I'm just saying I don't like certain things. And I'm really, really at a point of, why are they still going on 35 years later if we were so excited about changing it? Why do the powers that be keep putting and quashing everything that we want to do that's right and goodwill for people, for animals, for the environment, for the Earth tribe. Why not a world family instead of walls and borders and racism and all these problems? Like, I don't get it, but I have a child who's mixed, and I prayed for that child. I asked the ancestors for this child, right? I envisioned what he would look like and what he would be like. And I spoke with his father about this, and I didn't get pregnant right away, right? And I thought, oh my God, I've waited too long. I'm in my 30s. And everyone back then, and maybe still today, I don't know anymore because I don't hear it from my perspective. But a lot of people were saying, oh my God, your biological clock is ticking. And so I was like, oh my God, I waited too long. And I started looking at women pushing carriages and strollers. And I was like, oh, I was so selfish and egotistical that I wanted the BMW, and I wanted the career, and I wanted my finances set, and I wanted everything right. And now look what I did. I did the wrong thing. And so I went to Dr. Jose Bolaños eventually because, see, I doubted, right? I doubted. And he said, you're just not going to have a child. You've got endometriosis. It's just not going to happen. Just got too much scarring and back problems with your fallopian tubes, and it's just not going to happen. And I was like, oh my God. And so I researched and I went and I cleaned my womb. I know more today through 20 something years of helping other women. And I worked a job until I got to Cloquet, and I had a business, right? Even when I was taking care of an infant on my own, a job that I cut back to 2 days a week. And I eventually made up an excuse and said that, that I was laid off. I gave my employer 3 months notice, and I got myself into a situation when Zawa was 16 months old because I was really on the verge of having a nervous breakdown, sending him to someone else. I could not take it. So my blood pressure was up, the only time it ever has been in my life. And I was like, I cannot do this. Okay. So in 1992 and 1993, I went down to Mexico. And at first I went with a coworker named Angie Lamonti. And we went down there and we had this little place where we would stay. And she wanted to stay in the, the lodge or, the hotel in Cancun the majority of the time. And I was like, heck no. I want to get out. I want to go buy a smoothie, and I want to go sightseeing, and I want to go meet local people. I don't want to just do the tourist thing. And she's like, well, I'm never going to come with you again on a trip. And I was like, well, okay, so be it, because I've got no intention of doing another trip with you. And I met a local young man, not much younger than myself. And I said, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back by myself. And I want to go all the way down to Chiapas and Palenque. So I flew into Cancun by myself, came back, just known him for a couple days during that week, and got on a bus and bussed it to Merida, and then bussed it down to Palenque and Chiapas, and took another autobus and went to Palenque, and went all the way up to those ruins and sat there. And I said, I just need to sit here for a couple hours today. Like, I paid him some money, so it would be worth it to him because he's got to have his survival, right? I paid him $50 out of my $500 total to fly and eat and bus and everything. I bought his bus ticket. His name is Marcus. And so he and I went on this trip together. And so that was 93, and there was a revolution that broke out with the Zapatistas. And so as our bus was departing, because everybody was like, get out of town, the tanks were all rolling in. And I was like, whoa, right? And I had long braids. It was 1993 that had some extensions. So they were really long individual braids. And I had shorts on. We'd gone on Marcos, myself, and another man had set up a tour. One of the days we were all the way down there by Guatemala to go in the rainforest. It was like not an advertised or anything with a sign. I just said, is there a way we can get into the rainforest? I really want to see it. And he spoke Spanish to the guy and said, she wants to go. And he said, sure, if you've got the money, $50, tomorrow I'll come with 2 horses for you guys, and we'll ride into the rainforest about 3 hours each way. That was a long ride on a horse. And I went, deep into the rainforest and saw the birds and the monkeys. And I had a completely I had a complete experience that I'll never be able to add words to it. I'll just never be able to add words to that. In 1987, I went to Europe. I got a backpack, a frame on, and I went to meet a guy where I was working in a restaurant at the Rusty Pelican, carrying the trays and, the bathing suit with the skirt and all that. Great tips through part of my college time. And I met up with him. He let me stay at his place. He introduced me to his parents. So I ate at their place in Paris, went to the local little markets. He took me to Switzerland on the train, and I got to see Montreux, Switzerland. And then I came back. He wanted to marry me and have me move to France. And I was like, not quite sure. So my 1 year of college French took me a little bit, but the Parisians were kind of like, I can't really understand you. So in 1993 or 1994, I went to Jamaica and came back and got pregnant, and I lost that child with a miscarriage. So that was my first try, and that was really a bummer. And this happens to a lot of women. So I also learned from that. And 3 months later, I got pregnant with Zawa and had Zawa in August of 1995. So I've always been very intuitive. I was young and pretty, and I was kind of slowed down because of living on a standard American diet. And what I want now for young people is to understand, overstand word sound and the diet and the system and how we could make life so much better. Okay. So I think I got another note here. I talked about Chiapas. I talked about Dr. Jose Bolaños. Okay. When I was in Mexico and I stayed at Marcos's home, his mother and his sister was there too. We had a bucket to go to the bathroom, and there was like a bathroom, kind of a really small bathroom you went into, and there was a bucket on the ground. And I'm not too good for anything like that, but I think that my parents and a lot of people that I knew would have been really uncomfortable. Number one, to be alone out of the country, to be where Marcos lived, which any reasonable person would have easily called absolute slums. Okay. It was very scary at night to stay there. You were told not to go back out in the dark. There was a lot of stuff going on at night, and dogs out on the streets, scavenging for food in Cancun in the rough part of town in 1992 and 3. I helped their family to, scrub down the refrigerator, and we took and made with some corn tortillas and some carrots that we shredded and, different vegetables and stuff. And I learned a lot, and I prepared food together. And I was welcome. Because of being in Jamaica and meeting my son's parents, his grandparents, and his aunts and uncles and all their children, because of having partners, during my life that were from other places that people would call third world countries that I don't anymore. Maybe I did a long time ago, or I might refer to it that way so someone can understand what I'm saying. I've seen how they've got some water, and then this big water jug that they've got, even in Moko's videos on Ross Kitchen. That's got to be what they use, and they're very careful with it. I saw my grandmother, who had Great Depression mentality, save and rinse out the plastic bags and reuse and wash the foil and fold it up gently and put it to the side to use it again, and have all of her canned goods in the pantry, and always take something because California is infamous for earthquakes, right? And so over time, if you're expanding, you're intuitive, you're expanding your ability to be in a better vehicle, your physical, right? You've gone through experiences like the heroin experience I've gone through in the last 2.5 years. I could have just said, figure it out. You're going to find your own way, to my family member who wants to be unnamed. You're going to figure it out, But when someone calls you and there's overdoses and they're in the hospital and they're trying to go through treatment, these things are traps, and they're heavy duty traps. And so am I just going to turn my back? I don't think so. It's something that I stepped up and I've used Narcan probably about a dozen times to revive people. I've gone out and fed people when all I had was $20 left to my account. And let me get you a piece of chicken, because that's what they wanted, was chicken at, Champs, as I'm standing out there in the winter waiting for someone who's really, really high and out of their mind. What I've learned is that you undo disease because it's a process of becoming degenerated. So a lot of folks in my age group, when they look at my card, I'm looking for my card, it's behind me in this little basket I have, and they say, what's a regeneration specialist? And I go, a generator that you plug into your house, your RV, you all know what generators are, generates energy for your house, right? You're generating energy because your lungs are breathing and expanding, and they're producing energy for your heart. The calcium that flows through your veins, that's inside of your bones and comes out as needed, right? And you're eating it with your big leafy greens. You'd be foraging for your food with the red clover and the dandelion greens and the bitters, the wild raspberries that I'm out there eating, the cattails and everything else. But you're eating products in the store that have been manhandled, stickered and sprayed and shoved into like all these, hurry it up and push it through the cart. And, and I'm going, whoa, take a deep breath, man. That's my food. And I'd really like it if you could just take a chill on my food. So I'll wait until there's not 3 or 4 people in a line, or I'll wait and kind of vibes the checker I want to go to. And sometimes, Zawa or someone else will be like, why don't you just go right there? It's like a lot easier. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with those vibes right now, unless I'm in an absolute hurry, like, whoa, I kind of lost track of time and I got to get this stuff home and get to the shop and get myself into a centered, grounded space to greet a client, because that's sacred work that I do, and people expect that level of work, and they should. That's what time it is, okay? So over my life, I've heard you're a charlatan, you're nuts, she's crazy. And I think at one time, probably around 2005 and 6, when all these were getting drilled out of my mouth, and each one of them lets go of about 50 milligrams of mercury per day as you're chewing into your bloodstream. I think it probably was. I think being a solo parent and expecting from the other parent and not getting it back, asking for our son to connect with grandparents and other relatives so he'll have the connection in the event something happens to me or not, and not having that be forthcoming because she's kind of crazy. She's an obia woman. She's this, she's that. So in 2002, on July 1st, when I arrived in Minnesota after taking a month-long fun trip with my son, stopping in Idaho to see Grandpa, stopping in different places, and going into canyons and taking walks and farmers markets and exploring, taking it a month across country. It was such a luxury, right? When I got up here, there were no jobs. Bush had been elected and the economy had really shut down. And February 1st of 2003, I parlayed out one of my many certificates. I wasn't going to be able to get, gainfully bringing in money as an herbalist here. So I parlayed out the one for massage therapy, hoping that I could start to sort of infuse about herbs. And in the first shop that I went into, Danita Himala and Linda Bush, who's here in Cloquet, welcomed me into what was called Hair Dynamics on 14th Street. And I was going to rent the smaller room for $250 a month, or a fraction of what I was earning, because I told them I don't have any clients, I don't know anybody, I just got licensed, and I just spent my last $150 to get the licensing process done. And this means everything to me. It's, so when she introduced me to Linda Bush, I just said, I like her energy, she's really nice. And I was in my dress clothes from working in law firms and still new up here and job hunting. Nothing was coming through besides a $9.50 an hour job working in an attorney's office, filing away stuff in her attic, which was, it was beneath me, but I was still willing to do it. So they left a message on my answering machine when I got home that said, we don't want any new agers in here. We don't want new age people in here. So you're going to have to think about going somewhere else. And I thought, this is it. I told them I'd spent my last $150. I was polite, I had manners, and I showed back up and I just said, so here's the deal. We're all grown adults. You've made a verbal contract with me and I will enforce it if I need to. But after I've been in the shop for a while, why don't you then make an assessment about my character? Because using the word energy, I should not be judged on that. And come to find out, it really was just about jealousy. And today, if I see Danita, which I have over the years, coming back into town, she moved to North Dakota, I give her a nice big hug. Her uncles and aunts and grandparents have all still came to me over the years for massage. And that's all, in the wash. It's under the table. But that's kind of what happened. And so moving from California where, friends would come up and give a big loving hug, and the massage that I did was Esalen style, and it was so fluid, was starting with the spiral on the head and lovingly, moving the neck side to side and very quiet in the room, and the warm stones up and down the back, and really giving the body a good workout in the feet and getting all the starch, manually moving people's inflammation, mostly all white people with a lot of starch, a lot of potato, tater tot, rice, pasta, pizza eating, starch, flour and sugar and brown potatoes. And so lots and lots of creaky crackies and starch and overweight and animal eating and dairy eating. And so I did my best to educate. Okay. So you can see where if you go against the grain, you're going to be called nuts, right? You're going to be called crazy. You might be, so if you go in and even my having a meeting with the CEO of the hospital, Mr. Brewer, over the phone, because he wouldn't meet in person, and said, let's meet in person. I want to talk with you face to face. Millions of dollars were put into this hospital for the benefit of the people of the city of Cloquet, for the people of the community, for their health and wellness. As a homeowner and an over 10-year business owner at that time, someone who's taught 14 courses through Carleton Community Education. You can verify that with Jan Ashmore or Linda or one of the people at Carleton Community Education, who's taught 4 courses through Whole Foods in Duluth, Thyroid Madness, Mental and Emotional, Gluten-Free, Introduction to Raw, and Hemp Hooray. They've asked me to teach. What's the deal? I can't teach plant-based diet. Well, no, because you can't teach people. You can't tell people that they're going to reverse any of their symptoms of diabetes. It's in a direct conflict. I said, what do you mean it's a conflict? Are you not here to heal? Well, the American Diabetes Association says that all diabetes is incurable at this time. I said, well, pardon me. I actually assumed that you were an institution for the betterment of health and wellness. And I see I'm sadly mistaken. I see that we definitely have a conflict of interest, because I was going to charge $90 and bring the food and the handouts and prepare and shop for the food and make a very small profit margin and help our community. And those rooms were promised for all the money that this hospital received, tax exempt, I might add. I'm not tax exempt, but you are. I work hard with my hands for my money and my brain. So I'm going to look over my list here because I had a few more things I wanted to bring up. Let's see here. I choose, we live next, I live very, very close to Fond du Lac, which is an Indian reservation. And what the reservation has done with a lot of their money is create a casino, Black Bear Casino, which is nearby. And so a lot of local people go there they have every single night, they have a really fabulous food buffet under the, anybody's definition, maybe but mine. They do have a lot of fruit there too, which is kind of nice, and salads and selections. And I've been there many times, but a lot of folks go and they gamble. And so, it's a good business venture for the tribe. Definitely. Was it a good investment? Is it a sustainable option? I don't think so. That's my personal opinion, was setting up a gambling institution that has alcohol and lots of cigarette smoke a good idea for the people? I don't think so. I would have, and I did approach the reservation early on when I moved here and said, What about setting up, because you're a sovereign nation, what about setting up hemp farming? And what about setting up reversing disease and being a model worthy of imitation? And let me come on and teach a few of the classes for free. And then if you want to take over paying me, I can also afford to keep up my life, my basic life, and we can do these things. So clients came in as they parlayed out that massage therapy, which was 125 hours. 125 hour that I paid over $2,000 and bought my table just as another something to put in my medicine bag, never intending to do 17 years of massage therapy. Never. Okay, I thought I would do a little bit, help people out. I wasn't even going to charge for it, but I took it the massage practitioner, not the massage therapist level in California. It was 125 or 300 hour, I think. And there was a price difference. And I decided to do the 125 hour because I just wanted to know the basics about massage and how healthful it was. I knew how good I felt having recently just tried massage before I went to massage school in 1997 at Lupin, the place where you do not wear your clothing, or maybe today it's partial clothing optional is how they're becoming, much like Kiva, where I used to go in Santa Cruz. Okay, Kiva is really awesome if you want, Kiva. Okay, so people would come in on my massage table and I would put my hands on their clavicle and get started. And I would draw up images in a quiet room with ambient music and candles going and a dimmed, not dark, but the lights turned down so it's relaxing and not glaring on you. And hundreds of times I would say, and I got up the nerve to say, just like the Christmas cookies that I've mentioned a few times, how are you going to go out and tell someone who's your elder, I saw Christmas cookies when I touch you? If you've been called crazy long enough, you're expecting it. But I got to the point where I'm like, fuck it, that's just what I'm going to say. So I told the woman, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to my pastor to tell him, I'm not doing the Christmas cookies anymore. It's my last year. And I was like, yeah, Karen, God, you had the guts to say it. Good for you, right? Well, Carol came in, and I won't say her last name, so she's still anonymous. And it was this first or second massage I'd ever done for Carol, who's been coming for several years now, at least once every 3 weeks. And I told her, there's a black dog coming into your life, and your daughter is going to find this black dog, and she's going to bring it home. I didn't even know if she had a daughter. Okay, and she will attest to that. She's in my book called My Side of the Table, which the ancestors asked me to call the book that. So I did. I'm learning about how I need to revise my books and become a better writer so it's more crystal clear, because my head's going faster than sometimes my words, and I type faster, and sometimes I need to stop and pause and reread what I've written so it's crystal clear for every reader, because I have great content, but it needs to be delivered and received, or it's not great content. It's just words on a paper. It's words on paper. So I told her about the black dog and her daughter, and she texted me the next day or 2 days later, and she goes, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, yeah, I probably will. A local pastor's wife came in, and it was her first or second massage. She was quiet the whole time. She didn't tell me anything about her life. She wishes to be anonymous. She's part of a very big church here in Cloquet. There's no way she's ever going to talk it. Maybe if I asked her today, I don't know. But her mother this is a medium. So there's clair precognitive, which is the dog and the daughter. There's clairaudient or clairvoyant, seeing with the eyes. Well, my eyes are closed and I'm doing a massage. They're kind of closed. And I saw the Christmas cookies on the trays because the client was seeing trays of cookies, or she was thinking about cookies, right? So you can call it clairsentient or clairvoyant. It doesn't really matter. Then there's medium level work. And most people, when they give you a medium level reading, which no one can promise, the ancestors aren't a light switch. That's when you cannot promise anyone, is that type of a reading. When that occurs, it occurs. There's no controlling that, okay? You can't have a seance. You can't summons the dead. You can't pay the dead a certain amount of money and they'll show up. So her mother showed up I didn't know if her mother was alive or dead. I didn't know who her mother was, right? All I knew is that she had moved to Minnesota with her husband, who was a pastor from another place. And I won't say so I don't compromise her anonymity. So mom showed up. I saw the silhouette of mom pacing, and then mom showed me a big, big jewel in her hands. And sometimes, as I'm also trying to multitask and do the massage and see this movie that's being played up here in what I call the arena, I'm thinking, okay, remember that, remember that, remember that. So when she came out, I said, I saw this. Does this make sense? And she blurted out crying from her core. And she said, that's my mother. That's what she always said, right? This is mediumship level reading, okay? A medium doesn't give you psychic fluff like, oh, they're thinking about you, they love you so much. Was it something to do with the number 9? Was it? No. A medium, a connection is that spirit is always with us. Spirit never dies. There's no witchcraft, there's no channeling, there's no voodoo, there's nothing like that in there. It's just that if you are an open, you're open as a conduit, working with that person's coherent heart field, you will be a facilitator for what most people are unable to fathom, let alone stay present with. And I'm going to attribute this to my diet, my seeking, my gathering, my detoxification, my healing myself, my getting the mercury out of my body, walking, being at the gym, doing the steam room all those years, doing the yoga all those years, right? So even though a lot of things really backslid for me with moving to Cloquet, a lot of hurts, gaining weight, eating some wheat, going through the whole heroin thing, all of these things have been very, very powerful learning opportunities or teachers. And so I will often provide guidance to a woman who's in her 6th or 7th or starting on her 8th moon. I'm 2 years in to my 8th moon, the moon of infinity, the moon of loops. So and the 8th moon for me, because I intend to write about this, because I have a lot of very detailed insights about each moon, okay, as a female. Your 8th moon, you revisit a lot of the loops that you've had in your life. So things that happened to you in your childhood, they might happen to you. They might happen to your son. They might happen to your daughter. So I ask my clients, I tell my clients, if you show me your mother and father and your grandparents, I will tell you volumes about you. Because those loops, that unconscious mind has already been programmed. Okay, so all these years, for 35 years, I did not focus on growing a bank account. I did not focus on the accumulation of money. I have been carried by God. I have been carried by my sheer determination to get up when I felt like I couldn't even possibly stand there and do an hour-and-a-half massage, but I mustered the energy and I stood there and I did the hour-and-a-half massage and I went home, and oftentimes I still wasn't even able to sleep because I was on a hyper-vigilant alert based on the fact that there was so much potential on a life or death basis every single day. You would have just had to have seen it yourself, but Carleton County has an extremely high, I think it might even be the highest in Minnesota, opioid and addiction rate and suicide rate in Minnesota. And I know why. I've brought it up. People don't seem to want to be able to listen, but I have built a spiritual bank account, if you will. I have built memory banks full. As Shannon Luna used to say before she passed, who I love dearly, She's with the ancestors, resting in power. She used to say, you've got like multiple encyclopedias inside of you. She was my client for years. And I was like, well, thank you very much. And she said, I want to be better than you. And I said, you will be better than me. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd that she would say that, but I get it now, right? If you have the opportunity in your 20s, 30s, or 40s to expand, to learn these things, right? Then you're also facing the race of the plantation or the matrix, because there's a lot of traps out there, and you have your own loops. I'm going to do like the number 8. You have your own loops, right? And when you have the guide that is a shaman that's extremely seasoned, whether it's sitting down and you want to lose weight, or your thyroid is, you don't want to get stuck on levothyroxine forever, you don't want to take a synthetic thyroid hormone, the second most prescribed medication, or you're going into autoimmune, or you've read my testimonial about lupus with Ernestina, right? Or you've read my testimonial about 31 years of psoriasis with Pastor Brian Marshall from Duluth, reversing that in 6 sessions. Or you've read about Denny Wita's stage 3 kidney disease. You've heard about my ovarian cancer diagnosis confirmed with a CA-125 cancer antigen blood test, a CT scan, and looking at me laparoscopically, or going in and looking at a laparoscopic level. So whether you've seen those, what I'm saying is that for about 20 years, I didn't feel it was okay to charge money to anyone, because I felt in an honest way that you didn't write books until you'd really honestly become an expert. I've now written over 3,000 answers on Quora.com under Karen Pringle, right? I've written numerous blogs. I've written 2 books, and I have 4 more that really want to get out. And I'm stabilizing my own energy right now and feeling much more stable and really good. I'm doing client sessions through video conferencing to review their HTMA, which is hair tissue mineral analysis. And I earned these things through many, many, many years of making a decision to be self-employed and give more to my son as a mother, making the decision to be self-employed and put hours a day of study, moving to Cloquet, and at 42, my lifelong friends were 2,500 miles away. The decision was made to relocate because the cost of living here was lower, because I could get us into our own home, because I was a mother who wanted to nest, because by default, my plan laid out for a home in Felton that we were just about to buy didn't go through. So it's extremely important that when I guide my clients, that I've learned from my pluses, my minuses, my experiences, my mistakes, lots of mistakes, lots and lots, maybe more than most people. The abuses that I had as a young child, they're also a part of me. That's another part of me that keeps the young girl that is Karen fresh and alive inside of me, right? Is that I love her and I nurture her and I take care of her, right? So I'm still a very, very young. I go out and play and jump and, and enjoy my life. So I did not build a monetary bank account on some days. There are some days that I go, I really kind of regret that, because right now I'd like to have the center open. I'd like to be able to have a place where 4 to 6 or more people can come, and we can eventually hire staff. I can put together a plan for people, and I can really showcase the work where people have a place to come and I'm there with them every single day, 5-7 days a week. I'm there. The plan is laid out. The plan is fluid. It's on the computer. We know what it is. It's a drama-free, stress-free, low or no EMF environment, with the raw and plant-based foods, with the chai tea that I make from scratch, all the different varieties, and the great raw cheesecakes, and the supplements. I know what to do, and we do the HTMA immediately when they come in, and we start working on the plan and get people feeling better. So there's a lot more than that, They could come for preconception. They could come for addiction issues. I would like to eventually have a canine center. The work that I'm doing, I'm 100% sure, is not being done by anyone else right now at this time. This is not grandiose thinking. I am not someone that's out of an 18-month correspondence course to be a health coach. I am not someone who ever had an interest in doing an AMA medical school. I am someone who invested with hours and hours of sitting in Cloquet, and while my son had friends over, I'm studying, reading PubMed. I'm taking a course from Dr. Brownstein. I'm ordering Dr. Brownstein's couple of DVDs and watching them. I'm ordering his books on iodine. I'm ordering Thyroid Mind Power. I've got a whole bookshelf over there, and the ones that I think, they're so-so, and I've gotten to the point where I don't want to order most of them anymore. Most of the books don't really have anything for me because I've outgrown it. Okay. So every once in a while, a book comes along where I'm like, I want that book, just like the movies on Redbox or the movies in the theater. It's really once in a blue moon that I go, I want to go to that comedy and I just want to sit there and laugh. I just want to just have lots of belly laughs because that's super good medicine for me. Okay. So I'm going to look at my notes here really quick because there's a few things that I wanted to make sure that I wanted to get on here. Right, so spiritual, okay, so I had asthma, I had grief. That's what fueled the asthma that I had. I had relocated into the Valley in California in 1999, which is where my father lived, and he had a commercial HVAC business. I had the infertility issues that came up, and I think a lot of that had to do with the childhood sexual abuse trauma that I had that was so horrific. And I'm certainly not, one in a million. There's a lot of us out there, and that takes years to heal. And so oftentimes women will come to me as clients, and one of the most common questions I've had coaching women, because in coaching, typically it's not just one session. Typically it's like you're building a relationship, you and I. We're visiting with each other through the screen, just like this. And I've seen your wellness forum. We're deepening in. I'm asking you some key questions. And eventually, things come up. Sometimes we cry together. And sometimes, we're sitting there and we're talking about things that maybe you've never shared with anyone else. And instead of me going, oh, I've had that and blah, 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 I'm listening. And I'm saying, okay, I understand what you've just shared with me, and I have some ideas, and these ideas are important because just as the ovarian cancer, the asthma, the infertility, the partner letting me down, my child's father, the stress of becoming a solo parent and moving all the way across country, driving our stuff and our dog. And I mean, life is not going to come without stresses. It's just not. Some people want to stay in that one job for 25, 30, 40 years, or they become disabled and they stay home, and by absolute luck, all of their finances magically are just mastered for them. But they've got hideous, horrible disabilities to the point that you'd never, ever, ever, ever be able to live with them if you were reasonably awakened. It's just too difficult. So their energy will drain and drain and drain you. And you can see it in the pictures where the eyes start to really close down and the person starts to get bigger and bigger that lives with them, and the person starts to implode. Okay. So these things that I've had, the majority of them came from mind body. They came from pain that I was carrying in my psychic body, in my spiritual body, in my energetic astral body. Okay. There's many different layers to your energy body, and someone who is well experienced, who can have you on their table like I do in Cloquet, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays by appointment, can not just throw lotion on you and massage you. I'm using cacao, coconut, and shea butter that I call luminous. And add a little bit of lavender sometimes, or plain, or sometimes eucalyptus, depending, different things. A few times I've added wintergreen to give a person medicine on their skin, meaning it's full of minerals, okay? To teach them a little bit about their diet, to work them through stabilizing themselves if they've been through a stressor, because just like with the heroin, weeks into it, a person going into treatment and you going, oh, okay, I can relax. I can go to sleep at night. I can stop stuffing my mouth because I'm stressed. I can stop eating wheat when I know not to do it. I've cut all my hair off and it's going to grow back. And I'm getting my mineral supplements again. I'm taking care of me. That's restabilizing me. Now I can take the extra 35 pounds off. I can walk each day. I can make sure the dogs are okay. I can really go back to my giving 150% to my clients, because my world is now stable. So I can never expect, no matter if someone looks like the hippiest of the hippiest of the hippies, or the most Rastafari, natural dreadlocks and everything else, I find out they're eating cheese, they're drinking milk, they're eating pizza, they're drinking Guinness, they're just like me, when I got stressed, I was eating pretzels at Quick Trip, I was eating wheat when I know better, and my scalp got itchy, and, my body blew up because it creates a lot of central obesity, and it creates your moods up and down. And so it's difficult to find a pack, meaning you can absolutely trust. They have manners and respect. Ideally, they wouldn't be cussing or using curse words, which I didn't most of my life. Ideally, they would be keeping their environment reasonably clean. I have dogs, but it's mopped, it's swept, it's cleaned, because you've got lots of energy. Taking care of my neck, getting that range of motion back. Number 4 chiropractor today. So most of the time when we call someone nuts, it's a female. Most of the time we don't say, he's nuts. Usually it's always a female. And that's because of our copper levels being so much different than men, and copper being so much associated with estrogen, right? And if you look at copper excess issues, you'll see anger, rage, emotional instability, mood disorders, all the way into schizophrenia, if copper excess is combined with mercury, okay? If it's combined with low or really high calcium, right? Because calcium is going to regulate what's going on with your iron. If you've got lead in the body, your iron may be up really, really high as a response to driving the lead down out of your body. So where'd we get lead? We got lead from lots and lots of places, including pencils way back when we were in school, right? Lead paint that were on buildings and older buildings. We got lead exposures with all kinds of things. The same thing with copper, through amalgam fillings, through eating factory farmed animals that were given copper to keep all the infections down in the herds. So it's not fun to be called crazy, but I now actually take it as a compliment. If you can believe that, I take it as a compliment when someone calls me crazy, or take her with a grain of salt. And that's something really relatively new for me, because I think the combination of being financially disempowered, being seen as other by your own family, by your community, because you're so different, the financial disparity and despair, alongside your son becoming wounded, alongside a lot of emotional turbulence and pain, alongside your child being a weapon fashioned against you, because now he saw people eating what I don't eat. And that's very exciting to the palate. So a child wants the Go-Gurts, the mac and cheese, the Subway sandwiches, the buffet at Blackbird. Well, how come we don't go there? That's because you're mean and you're awful, and oh my God, and I said, no, and we're taking away the Game Boy too. Oh my God, you just hate me. So once you are on a diet that's cleansing and detoxifying, and you go back and you start eating like I have recently, the wheat, or you go back and you start eating chickens and eggs and yogurts and pizza and all these things, you will be mood disordered. It might be called ODD or ADHD or ASD, because ADHD is now equated with ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, right? And I believe that everyone born after 1980 is actually ASD. We don't see it yet, and that's what drives a lot of our people, is through these inefficiencies in their thinking and developmental delays. It's causing people to go out and use substances, right? And so opioids, I believe, was designed for that purpose. I'm gonna look at my notes because I told you this is going to be a super long one. Make sure I got everything I wanted to cover here. I think so. Yeah, let's see. So in summary, and to finish up, what I'm looking for right now is I'm looking for someone who sees the value of what I have to offer and is either willing to offer up a donation so I can get into an RV and go out and meet and greet the people and not be in a situation where I have to stay planted in one spot. And I can go out and continue to earn my way into the center if there's not the donations for it. There's been donations for people to go out and live in, $17,000 vans, $17,000 worth of donations came in for a young man to go out and, talk about herbs and stuff on the ground. And I think that was really beautiful. But I'm looking for someone who also has that kind of a heart and has that ability and maybe says, hey, this is a gift I'd like to give to you. I can see that you're legit. I can see you've been through these things. I can see that you're articulate, you're professional, you have integrity, and you really honestly want to have the center. I want to have the center. I want to be able to adopt children that are not stolen by CPS and have land to grow the food that the center is on, even if it's 3/4 of an acre and we've got, a container garden or we've got some raised beds. I want to have the permaculture and be growing a lot of the food that's going to be used in the center. And I have the legal background to keep us out of liability in it being called a spiritual retreat or a detoxification center, and sticking to a very, very solid business plan, either funded by an angel investor, promised an ROI, or through donation or donations, plural. So I have a lot of experience, and I've touched on what I would do. I can go into more detail if you're watching this on YouTube, and I know it's been a very long video. I intended for this one to be a little bit longer because I wanted to fill in a lot of information. I'm going to be doing a video hopefully tomorrow that Val has requested, who's in Alaska right now. He's not here on Facebook, but he will be on YouTube. And he's asked me to do one between the difference between, meaning detailing the difference between intuition and logic. So how do you know when to trust your intuition? How do you know when it's your intuition? So if you could have all of those hundreds of my clients speak up and say, she said this to me and it was true, and she said this, and how did she know that? I'm asking Elsie right now, who's given me the okay to give her name, to maybe write something out, because she's been a client of mine for 15 years, and it really is like pulling teeth to get people to write or give a testimonial. I don't know why. Sometimes it's because that whole witchcraft paradigm has permeated the minds of people, and they feel like they might be violating God or Jesus or something, when these are innately geared inside of us to have sensing in addition to eyes, nose, ears, and mouth, right? That's why they used to call it the sixth sense, is because there's, the ability to see from the Trinity that's within the head, the pituitary, the pineal, and the hypothalamus. That's why when we speak about thyroid, we speak about the HPA axis. Capital letters HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So that hypothalamus that is synthesizing and secreting is connected, it's an axis, right, to the pituitary, the little P-shaped gland kind of in the middle of the head there, tiny, with the adrenals, the two P-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys that have everything to do with the norepinephrine and adrenaline, the fight or flight, and the cortisol, right? The corticosteroid cortisol, that is a stress hormone. So with going through the heroin or the ovarian cancer or the abuse of power issue in 2008, or feeling trapped financially somewhere, or feeling like you're other around coworkers and community members and neighbors, and and then you start talking and sharing with someone, or you take them under your wing and you find out, yeah, that was too much for them too. They're going to kind of, skedaddle. So being called nuts, crazy, a charlatan, if people had a real overstanding about what I really get when it comes to healing people. And women have so much more than men because we're wired and geared differently than men. We give birth, men don't as of right now, although I guess that's pretty soon on the horizon that they will be. But because of our estrogen and copper levels, we're much more intuitive and feeling and sensing beings. And if you had also put in what I put in as a child with my grandmother, learning to be a medicine woman, and you'd become an herbalist and a massage therapist, and you'd worked bodies with your hands for almost 17 years, and you had studied every day in a place where you got out and walked the dogs, you were outside for sure, you went and did your massage clients, which is not an 8-hour a day, and you just, you kind of just skid by financially, and you worked clients through, video coaching and did hair testing, you'd learn a lot too. But combined with the herb, massage, the yoga, the mind body, the hair testing, and on and on and on with all the study that I've done, I see through a lot of things that a lot of people don't. And I can see it in the way that I'm going to this hormone symposium. I'm like, who cares? I don't even have the slightest desire to go to that, because it's like, I don't want to use idioms that are against animals, but it's like beating a stucco house instead of beating a dead horse. We don't want to use terroristic idioms against animals. PETA's really big on that, and I really enjoy that too, supporting that. So, it's like flogging a house. It's like, it's a no-win situation. If I go and I say, but I've got great ideas, it doesn't matter. I've spoken to over 100 doctors in person in the Northland, in the Twin Cities, and not one of them can really hear me. They insist again, like, do you have like a manic mental illness? And I go, no, I'm excited about this. And if we combined mind body with body work on the table, detoxification after we stabilized and gathered, and we regenerate people by undoing the hot mess that they've come to be in, things really improve. We can give it our best shot for people that are kind of, long-term into a diagnosis, and, we're upwards in age, but we're doing things kind of backwards, and it's time to turn it around. So that's what I had to say. Calling me crazy anymore? Well, I'm going to make nut butter out of being called a nut. So I love macadamias, cashews, almonds, make them raw, make them organic, make them mineral rich, give me good mineral rich soil so that I can really sustain myself well, and I'll make nut butter out of that. In fact, I'm hoping that what we'd have at the center eventually would be a real authentic granite-based nut mill. And I would be making fresh hemp seed or a variety of different nut and seed milks. We'd be having our flax crackers and other types of crackers from garden-grown produce in the dehydrator. We'd be doing a really super nice, rejuvenating, yoga course. We wouldn't have to worry about shaving our arms and our legs if we didn't want to. It could be a place where you can just relax and stabilize, whether that's for a couple of days or it's for a couple of weeks, or we make an agreement for a more long-term arrangement and you're there for 6 months or you're there for a year. And that's your time to regenerate yourself so that you can be in an environment that feels holistic, it feels safe, it feels drama-free, it feels like it's EMF-free for people like myself that are very sensitive. I used to drive and under street lights and feel like, I could feel each one. And I realize now it's not that I was special. It's not that I was God's favorite. No, it's that I was so full of mercury that my body was just, and I was so high copper. My copper level was in 2017 a 4.8, and I'm going to, again, do a profile 3 for me once things have stabilized really well and I've pulled off the weight, and I'm going to put the test results side by side in a profile 3, which is what I recommend my clients do, so I can see the progress I've made, because then sometimes the mercury will show higher than it did in the previous test because you've mobilized other minerals that were at a relative level that were stuck in your liver. You need to mobilize and excrete those, right? So one of my best courses that I taught was called Thyroid Madness. I also taught Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired about hypoadrenia in 2010. I brought in Joe Meese and Jocelyn, who's a naturopath locally up here, who went to school and graduated and came after I'd been here with my own business. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, I'd really like to do something, contact me if you're serious. We'll have private discussion through video if we're out of state. I need to get mobile. I really do need donations to get into an RV that's reasonable. I feel like someone is going to say, hey, I've got this. I want you to have this. And I know it sounds really, I hesitate because I've always been someone who's I worked very, very hard with my hands to ask, but I see other people doing it and I don't want to wait around till I'm 70. I just turned 58 in July. Right now is the peak time in my life to have that center going by the time I hit my 9th moon at age 63. So the gardens are set in place. The children are adopted. They're learning the medicine. They're homeschooling with me. And they're learning other languages and art and music. And I get a chance to get Ari and Zawa into, and Devin and Naya into something that feels really, really good, And so that's what I want to do. And someone who's like, or maybe the donation that you have is that you're just a publishing house and you want to help me get these books done so that they're really out there and they're marketed really strongly, then get a hold of me at naturallywithkaren@gmail.com, or go to my Facebook page, Naturally with Karen, or Hair Tissue Mineral Analysis is another new page. And my phone number's on there, and give me a call or text me and say, hey, I saw your live stream. I'm really serious. I want to have a conversation about getting you mobile or about getting the center going. Okay, or about doing some coaching with you. Either way, that's very supportive and I appreciate that. So, yeah, sappy. So Zach Harrison said sappy, and it's like, it's too much of a coincidence that there's so much dysfunction. There's so many people that have hurt themselves. There's so much suicide, depression, anxiety, gliomas, and brain tumors. And my cousin died of a brain tumor here. My uncle shot himself with a 357. There's too many things. I wish I could go into more, but we're living in a society that says you've got to be private. It's got to be confidential. You're going to get in trouble if you talk about that. So there's other things I'd love to speak about, but I'm a very talented woman because I earned it. I'm a powerful woman because I learned to advocate through some of these situations that I went through. And I'm an advocate for all people. And even though I may speak about something that is glandular derangement, doesn't mean I dislike anyone. So I just want to make sure that's out there too. So thank you for joining me. Let's see, Sabrina, Wolf Moon, Hannah, Yun Chen, Joseph Harley, Dana Swint, Zach Harrison, Kim, and others. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining me tonight, and I thank you for the gift of your time. Have a good night. Until next